Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the transport ship New Horizon, watching Earth get smaller through the viewport. No bands played music and no crowds cheered goodbye. The last group of humans was leaving their homeworld in silence, just like all the others had done over the past 6 months. The ship carried 15,000 people in its belly, along with everything they could take from their old lives. Children pressed their faces against windows, trying to see their planet one more time. Adults sat quietly holding small bags that contained photos and memories. Nobody talked much, because there was nothing left to say. Dr. Lisa Grant walked through the ship, checking on families and making sure everyone had what they needed. She had been the human ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years before. Everything went wrong. The Council had made their final decision 3 months ago. All humans had to move to special areas of space where the alien governments could watch them better. They called it relocation for galactic stability, but everyone knew what it really meant. The aliens thought humans were troublemakers who asked too many questions and wanted too much freedom. The Zephyrian Empire complained that humans always found new ways to do old jobs. The Crystalline Collective said humans made other species feel inferior with their constant improvements to everything. The Void Hunters just wanted humans to stay in their assigned places and stop exploring new star systems. So the Galactic Council voted and humanity lost. Earth and all human colonies had to be given up. Every human had to move to designated sectors where they would be safe and controlled. The Council promised good living conditions and fair treatment. They also promised that this was temporary until tensions in the galaxy cooled down. Lisa knew better, and so did most other humans. This was not temporary, and it was not about safety. The alien species had finally gotten tired of sharing space with humans who refused to follow all their rules. Humans had always been different from other species in the galaxy. While aliens followed traditions and did things the same way for centuries, humans kept changing and improving everything they touched. Captain Ben Hughes piloted the New Horizon through the outer edge of the solar system. He had been flying ships for 20 years, and this was the hardest flight of his life. Behind him, Earth was empty of human life for the first time in 200,000 years. The cities still had power and the machines still worked, but no human voices could be heard anywhere on the planet. The exodus had been planned carefully over many months. Every human leader from every colony and every ship had worked together in secret. They had 6 months to get everyone out before the Council sent their enforcement fleets to make sure the relocation happened. But humans had used those 6 months for something the aliens did not expect. Amy Walsh worked in the engineering section of the New Horizon, making sure all systems ran smoothly. She had spent her whole career fixing problems that nobody else could solve. Human engineers were famous throughout the galaxy for finding solutions that seemed impossible. When alien technology failed in strange ways, they always called humans to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. Amy remembered the day she realized what was really happening. She had been working on a water treatment plant on the colony, world of Haven Prime. The plant used both human and alien technology mixed together to clean water for 3 million people. The alien parts were reliable and efficient, but they could only work in perfect conditions. The human parts were the ones that made everything flexible enough to handle problems. The plant had been designed by aliens, but built by humans. Every day human workers made small adjustments and improvements that kept everything running better than the original plan said it should. When something unexpected happened, humans figured out creative solutions that fixed problems before they became disasters. The aliens who managed the plant wrote reports about how well their design worked, but they never understood the humans were the real reason for success. Amy was leaving Haven Prime along with every other human. The aliens would inherit a perfect water treatment plant along with detailed instruction manuals and maintenance schedules. What they would not inherit was the human ability to solve problems that the manuals never covered. Amy wondered how long it would take before the plant started having issues that confused the new alien operators. Thought the same thing was happening on hundreds of worlds across human space. Humans were leaving behind cities and farms and factories that worked perfectly. Every system had been tested and every manual had been updated. Replacement parts were stocked and backup systems were ready. On paper, everything looked fine, and the aliens were pleased to take over such well-maintained facilities. But humans knew something the aliens did not understand. All of those systems depended on human workers who could think creatively when things went wrong. Machines broke down in ways that manuals could not predict. Problems happened that required solutions nobody had ever tried before. Equipment worked better when humans found small improvements that made big differences over time. Jake Morrison had worked with alien species for most of his adult life, and he understood how different they were from humans. Aliens were very good at following rules and procedures. They could build amazing technology and create complex systems that lasted for centuries. Their societies were stable, and their governments were efficient. But they had trouble dealing with chaos and unexpected change. Humans were the opposite in many ways. They were not as good at following rules, and they changed their minds about things too often. Human technology was sometimes messy, and human societies were often unstable. But humans were incredibly good at adapting to new situations and finding solutions that nobody had thought of before. When something went wrong in a way that had never happened before, humans could usually figure out what to do. The galaxy had been peaceful and prosperous for the past 50 years, partly because humans handled all the problems that aliens could not solve easily. Human engineers fixed equipment that failed in strange ways. Human doctors treated diseases that did not respond to standard medicine. Human traders found routes through dangerous space that others thought were impossible. Human farmers grew food in conditions that should have killed all crops. Aliens thought these were just jobs that humans happened to be good at doing. They did not realize that humans were actually holding the whole galactic civilization together by solving thousands of small problems every day. Without humans, many things that seemed stable and reliable would start falling apart in ways that alien logic could not easily fix. Dr. Lisa Grant understood this better than most people because she had worked directly with the Galactic Council for so many years. She had watched alien leaders make decisions based on theories and models that looked perfect on computer screens. When those decisions created unexpected problems, the aliens always called humans to clean up the mess. Then they would go back to making more decisions the same way without learning from what had happened. Now humans were leaving and taking their problem-solving abilities with them. The aliens were getting everything they wanted, which was a galaxy without human interference. What they did not realize was that they were also getting a galaxy without human solutions to problems they did not even know existed yet. The new Horizon reached the jump point that would take them out of council space forever. Jake Morrison looked at his crew and saw the same mixture of sadness and determination on every face. They were leaving behind the only home humanity had ever known, but they were also leaving behind people who had never really wanted them as equals. Amy Walsh checked her systems one more time and reported that everything was ready for the jump to hyperspace. Lisa Grant made a final announcement to everyone on the ship that they were about to start their journey to a new home among distant stars. The ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its precious cargo of human lives toward an uncertain but hopeful future. Behind them, Earth continued to orbit the sun in perfect silence, while alien ships moved in to take control of empty human cities. The great human exodus was complete, and everything seemed normal in the galaxy. The aliens were satisfied that they had solved their human problem without violence or drama. Soon they would learn that they had made a terrible mistake, but for Now they celebrated their victory and looked forward to a more orderly future, without human chaos disrupting their careful plans. 3 months had passed since the last human transport ship left. Council Space and Counselor Vexthera of the Aquatic Dominion was starting to worry about strange reports coming from several worlds. The water purification systems on 12 different planets had stopped working properly, all at the same time. These were not simple mechanical failures that could be fixed with replacement parts. The systems were failing in ways that made no sense according to their design specifications. Vexthera floated in her command chamber, reviewing the technical reports that kept arriving every day. The purification plants had been built using hybrid technology that combined alien engineering with human modifications. The alien parts were solid and reliable as always, but the human additions had seemed like simple improvements that made the systems work better. Now those human modifications were causing problems that the original alien designers could not understand. On the water world of Aquanus Prime, the main treatment facility had started producing water that met all safety standards but tasted wrong to the local population. The chemical analysis showed everything was perfect, but somehow the water made people feel sick after drinking it for several days. The plant operators had tried adjusting every setting they could find, but nothing helped. The instruction manuals left by human engineers mentioned something called intuitive calibration, but nobody knew what that meant. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hughes sat in the hidden monitoring station that humans had built in the Outer Rim before their departure. His job was to watch what happened in Council Space after humans left and report back to the human leadership. The monitoring station was disguised as an old asteroid mining platform that had been abandoned years ago. Council patrols passed by regularly, but never bothered to scan it carefully. Ben had been watching the water treatment crisis develop for weeks, and he was not surprised by what he saw. Human engineers had always known that the hybrid systems needed constant small adjustments to work properly. The alien parts were designed to handle normal conditions, but real life was never exactly normal. Water sources changed slightly over time, and equipment aged in ways that affected performance. Human operators had learned to make tiny changes every day that kept everything working smoothly. The aliens had detailed records of what the human workers did, but they had never understood why those actions were necessary. To alien logic, the systems should work exactly as designed without any modifications. When problems developed, there should be clear procedures to follow that would fix everything. The idea that equipment might need creative solutions to handle unexpected situations was foreign to how aliens thought about technology. Engineer Amy Walsh was now living on the colony ship Exodus Dawn, along with 50,000 other humans who were traveling to a new star system far from Council Space. She spent her days working on the ship systems and teaching young people how to solve engineering problems. Her daughter Emma was only 8 years old, but she already showed the human talent for finding creative solutions when normal methods did not work. Amy had been following the reports about system failures in Council Space through encrypted communications that humans had left behind. She was not surprised that the water treatment plants were having problems. Those systems had been some of the most complex hybrid technologies that humans and aliens had built together. They required the kind of thinking that came naturally to humans but was very difficult for most alien species. The water treatment plants were just the beginning of a much larger problem that the aliens had not yet realized. Humans had been involved in designing and maintaining thousands of different systems throughout Council Space. Most of these systems worked perfectly under normal conditions, but they all depended on human workers who could handle unusual situations with creative problem solving. On the mining world of Kepler-7, the Crystalline Collective was discovering that their newly inherited asteroid mining operation was producing much less valuable ore than expected. The mining equipment was working exactly as designed, and all the procedures were being followed correctly. But somehow the output had dropped by more than half since the human workers left. The crystalline beings were master engineers who had built some of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They could not understand why simple mining equipment was not performing according to its specifications. The human workers had followed the same procedures that the aliens were using now. The only difference was that humans were no longer operating. The machinery what the crystalline collective did not know was that human miners had developed dozens of small techniques over the years that made the equipment work much better. They knew how to read subtle signs that indicated where the best ore could be found. They could tell when equipment was about to break down before any alarm sounded. They made tiny adjustments to drilling patterns that increased efficiency without changing the official procedures. All of these improvements had been passed down from one human worker to another through informal training that was never written in any manual. The aliens had inherited the equipment and the official procedures, but they had lost the accumulated knowledge that made everything work better. Now they were learning that there was a big difference between knowing how something was supposed to work and knowing how to make it actually work well. Commander Rachel Stone led a small human fleet that was exploring star systems beyond the edge of known space. Her mission was to find suitable worlds for human colonization while staying far away from any alien territories. The human leadership had decided that it was better to start completely fresh rather than trying to negotiate with alien governments that had already proven they could not be trusted. Rachel had been monitoring alien communications, and she could see that problems were developing faster than anyone had expected. The aliens had assumed that losing human workers would be a minor inconvenience that could be solved by hiring more alien workers or building better automated systems. They had not understood that humans provided something that could not be easily replaced by other species or by machines. The proud warrior culture of the Drakmor Empire was facing embarrassing problems with their battle fleets. Ships that had been perfectly maintained by human engineering crews were now breaking down during routine patrols. The breakdowns were not caused by major system failures that would show up in regular inspections. Instead, they were caused by hundreds of small problems that human maintenance teams had prevented through what aliens had dismissed as primitive intuition. Human engineers had always been able to sense when something was not quite right with a ship, even when all the diagnostic systems showed green lights. They could hear subtle changes in engine sounds that indicated potential problems. They could feel vibrations that suggested equipment was wearing out faster than expected. They knew which spare parts to keep ready and which systems needed extra attention. During long missions, the Drakmor had detailed maintenance schedules and sophisticated diagnostic equipment, but they lacked the human ability to notice problems before they became serious. Their ships were now experiencing failures that caught them completely by surprise. Equipment that should have lasted for years was breaking down after only a few months. Systems that had never failed before were suddenly causing mission-critical problems. Dr. Nathan Pierce had been the head of interspecies medicine before the human exodus, and he was now working as a doctor on one of the colony ships. He had been following reports of a medical crisis that was developing on several core worlds. A new disease had appeared that was similar to illnesses that humans had successfully treated before. The cure existed, and alien doctors had access to all the research and treatment protocols that human doctors had developed, but the alien doctors were having trouble adapting this treatment to work with different alien biologies. Human doctors had always been good at modifying treatments when standard procedures did not work perfectly. They could look at how a patient was responding and make creative changes that improved outcomes. This kind of medical intuition was difficult for alien doctors who preferred to follow established protocols exactly. The disease was spreading faster than the alien medical system could handle it. Hospitals were filling up with patients who should have been cured easily, but instead were getting worse, despite receiving technically correct treatment. The alien doctors knew what to do according to their medical textbooks, but they could not figure out why their treatments were not working as well as they had. When human doctors were available to help, young Tommy Chun had been born on a human colony ship and had never seen Earth or any of the worlds that humans had left behind. He learned about the old galaxy from stories that older people told and from recorded history lessons. To Tommy, the idea that humans had once lived among aliens seemed strange and uncomfortable. He could not understand why humans had ever wanted to be part of a society that did not respect them. Back in Council space, the crisis was getting worse every day. The Council members were starting to realize that humans had been more important to galactic civilization than anyone had understood. But they still thought the problems could be solved with better planning and more resources. 6 months after the human departure, the galaxy was experiencing problems that no alien government had expected. The most serious crisis was happening at Station Nexus Prime, which served as the central trading hub for 17 different star systems. The massive space station had been operating smoothly for over 30 years, but now its main computer system was making decisions that seemed completely random and dangerous. The station AI had been originally programmed by Dr. Kevin Ross, who was now somewhere in deep space with the human Exodus fleet. Kevin had spent 5 years creating a computer system that could handle the complex logistics of managing trade between dozens of different alien species. The AI was supposed to automatically assign docking bays, schedule cargo transfers, and coordinate the movement of thousands of ships every day. But the AI was no longer working correctly, and nobody could figure out why. Ships were being assigned to docking bays that were too small for them. Cargo was being mixed up and sent to wrong destinations. The traffic control system was creating dangerous situations by routing ships through the same flight paths at the same time. Every day brought new problems that made trade more difficult and more expensive. Station Commander Zix Kentel had called in the best alien computer experts from across the galaxy, but none of them could fix the AI system. The programming code was incredibly complex, and it had been modified so many times over the years that nobody could follow all the changes. Every time the experts tried to fix one problem, they seemed to create 2 new problems somewhere else. What the aliens did not understand was that the AI system had never been designed to work completely automatically. Dr. Kevin Ross had built it to work together with human operators who could make intuitive decisions when the computer encountered situations it had not been programmed to handle. The AI would identify problems and suggest solutions, but humans would make the final decisions about what to do. Human operators had been working with the AI system every day for years, and they had developed an understanding of how it thought and what its limitations were. When the computer suggested something that seemed wrong, humans would override its decisions and teach it better ways to handle similar situations in the future. This constant cooperation between human intuition and artificial intelligence had made the system much more effective than either could be alone. Now the AI was trying to operate without human guidance, and it was making mistakes that seemed obvious to anyone who understood how trade actually worked. But the alien operators did not have the same kind of relationship with the computer system that humans had developed. They followed its recommendations, even when those recommendations made no sense, because they had been trained to trust artificial intelligence more than their own judgment. Commander Rachel Stone was monitoring the situation at Station Nexus Prime from her position with the human exploration fleet. She could see that the crisis was getting worse every day, and she knew it would not be long before the station had to shut down completely. When that happened, trade throughout the region would collapse, and millions of people would suffer from shortages of essential goods. Rachel had worked at Station Nexus Prime for 3 years before the human exodus, and she understood exactly what was wrong with the AI system. The computer was trying to optimize everything according to mathematical formulas that looked perfect on paper, but did not account for the messy realities of how different alien species actually behaved. Humans had always known that efficient trade required flexibility and creative problem solving that no computer could provide. The medical crisis was also getting much worse as alien doctors struggled to handle problems that human doctors had always solved easily. The healing pods that were used in hospitals throughout the galaxy had started rejecting patients for no apparent reason. These devices could cure most diseases and heal most injuries, but they required constant adjustments to work properly with different alien biologies. Dr. Nathan Pierce had helped design the healing pod system, and he knew that the devices were supposed to be adjusted based on how each individual patient responded to treatment. The pods would analyze a patient and suggest treatment options, but human doctors would modify those suggestions based on their medical experience and knowledge of how different species healed. Human doctors had developed an intuitive understanding of how the healing pods worked, and they could usually tell when something was not quite right with a treatment. They would make small changes to the pod settings that improved outcomes even when the computer analysis suggested that no changes were needed. This kind of medical intuition had made the pods much more effective than their original designers had expected. Now alien doctors were using the healing pods exactly as the instruction manuals said they should be used. They followed all the correct procedures and used all the recommended settings, but they were not getting the same good results that human doctors had achieved. Patients who should have been cured quickly were taking much longer to heal. Some patients were getting worse despite receiving treatment that was technically perfect according to the pod specifications. The proud Drakmor Empire was facing the most embarrassing problems because their mighty war fleets were falling apart in ways that made no sense to their military engineers. Ships that had been perfectly maintained were suddenly experiencing multiple system failures during routine missions. Equipment that should have lasted for decades was breaking down after only a few months without human maintenance crews. General Robert Hayes had commanded Drakmor fleet operations before the human exodus, and he had always insisted that human and alien crew members worked together on every ship. The aliens were excellent at following maintenance procedures exactly as written, but humans were better at noticing when something was not working the way it should. Human engineers could sense problems before diagnostic systems detected them, and they could improvise solutions when standard procedures did not work. The Drakmor had inherited detailed maintenance manuals and sophisticated diagnostic equipment, but they had lost the human ability to prevent problems before they became serious. Their ships were now experiencing cascade failures where one small problem would lead to several larger problems that overwhelmed the repair crews. Systems that had worked together smoothly for years were now interfering with each other in ways that no one had anticipated. Amy Walsh was teaching engineering classes aboard the colony ship Exodus Dawn, and she often used examples from the crisis in council space to show her students how important creative thinking was in solving technical problems. Her daughter Emma was learning fast, and she already understood that machines were only as good as the people who operated them. Amy had been following reports about the infrastructure failures that were happening throughout alien space. Power grids were becoming unstable because human operators were no longer available to make the small adjustments that kept everything balanced. Transportation systems were experiencing delays because human traffic controllers were not there to find creative solutions when unexpected problems occurred. The aliens had assumed that these systems were mostly automated and that losing human operators would not make much difference. They had not realized that humans had been making hundreds of decisions every day that prevented small problems from becoming major disasters. Without human oversight, the systems were slowly falling apart in ways that confused and frustrated alien engineers. On the agricultural world of Harvest Prime, The crop yields were dropping dramatically, despite perfect weather conditions and abundant resources. The farming systems had been designed by alien botanists using the most advanced agricultural science available. The systems should have produced exactly the same yields, whether they were operated by humans or aliens. But human farmers had always done much more than just follow the scientific procedures for growing crops. They had developed an intuitive understanding of how plants responded to subtle changes in soil conditions, weather patterns, and pest populations. They could tell when crops needed different nutrients or when irrigation systems needed to be adjusted to handle changing conditions. Human farmers had made thousands of small improvements over the years that increased crop yields without changing the basic scientific methods. They had learned which varieties of plants grew best in specific locations and which farming techniques worked better in practice than they did in theory. All of this knowledge had been passed down from one generation of farmers to another through hands-on experience rather than formal education. The alien farmers who inherited the agricultural systems had detailed scientific knowledge and sophisticated equipment, but they lacked the practical wisdom that human farmers had, developed through decades of trial and error. They were following all the correct procedures, but they were not getting the same results that humans had achieved year after year. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hughes was still monitoring the situation from his hidden observation post, and he could see that the crisis was spreading faster than alien governments could respond to it. Every day brought new reports of systems failing in unexpected ways. The aliens were starting to realize that they had lost something important when humans left, but they still did not understand exactly what that was. 1 year after the human Exodus, Counselor Supreme Zix Kentel called an emergency session of the Galactic Council that would change the course of history. Representatives from every major alien species gathered in the Great Chamber on Centris, primed to discuss what they were now calling the human crisis. The economic data was undeniable and terrifying. The galactic economy had shrunk by 40% in just 12 months, and the decline was accelerating. 17 worlds were facing complete ecological collapse as their environmental systems failed without human operators to maintain them. The great trade routes that had connected distant star systems for decades had become dangerous passages filled with pirates and broken navigation beacons. Food shortages were developing on agricultural worlds that had never experienced hunger before the humans left. Zix Kentel floated at the center of the chamber, reviewing reports that painted a picture of cascading disasters throughout Council space. The water purification crisis had spread to 37 worlds and showed no signs of stopping. The medical emergency was overwhelming hospitals as healing pods continued to malfunction in ways that alien doctors could not fix. Military fleets were grounded because their ships kept breaking down, despite following perfect maintenance procedures. But the worst news was yet to come. The Council headquarters building itself was experiencing life support failures that threatened to shut down the government completely. The environmental systems had been designed by alien engineers, but they had been modified and improved by human technicians over many years. Now those modifications were causing problems that no one understood or knew how to repair. Admiral Lisa Grant received the first official communication from the Galactic Council at her command post aboard the human flagship Independence. The message was formal and diplomatic, but its meaning was clear. The Council was requesting consultation services from human technical experts to help solve urgent problems in Council space. The word consultation was carefully chosen to avoid any suggestion that the aliens were asking humans to return permanently. Lisa shared the message with her senior staff, including General Robert Hayes and Chief Engineer Diana Foster. They all understood what the message really meant. The proud alien civilizations that had forced humanity into exile were now admitting that they could not survive without human help. But they were still trying to maintain their dignity by pretending this was just a temporary business arrangement, The human leadership had been expecting this moment for months. They had watched the crisis develop through their monitoring networks, and they had prepared their response carefully. The aliens would get an answer, but it would not be the answer they wanted to hear. The ethereal communion was the most advanced telepathic species in the galaxy, and they had always considered themselves superior to humans in every way. Their mental abilities allowed them to share thoughts and emotions across vast distances. Their technology was based on pure thought rather than crude physical mechanisms. They had believed that humans were primitive creatures who relied on instinct because they lacked telepathic abilities. But now the ethereal communion was facing problems that their telepathic abilities could not solve. Their thought-based technology required precise mental control that worked perfectly under normal conditions. When unexpected problems occurred, the systems became unstable because they could not handle the kind of chaotic thinking that was needed to find creative solutions. The ethereals had always dismissed human problem-solving as random trial and error that produced accidental successes. They had not understood that human creativity was actually a sophisticated form of thinking that could find patterns and solutions the logical analysis missed. Now they were discovering that their pure logical approach to problems was not sufficient to handle the complexity of real-world situations. Young Tommy Chun was now 12 years old and had spent his entire life aboard human colony ships, traveling to distant stars. He had never experienced the galaxy that his parents remembered, but he learned about it through stories and historical records. To Tommy, the idea that humans had once served alien masters seemed incredible and disturbing. Tommy was learning advanced engineering from teachers like Amy Walsh, who had worked with alien technology for decades. But the lessons were different now, because humans were no longer trying to fit into alien systems. Instead, they were creating their own technology that reflected human values and human ways of thinking about problems. The human colonies were developing innovations that would have been impossible under alien oversight. Human engineers were combining creativity with scientific knowledge in ways that produced solutions no alien species had ever imagined. The technology was sometimes messy and unpredictable, but it was also incredibly effective at handling unexpected challenges. Back in Council space, the crisis was reaching a breaking point that would force the aliens to confront the full extent of their mistake. The agricultural world of Harvest Prime had lost 60% of its crop production and was facing widespread famine. The industrial world of Factory 7 had shut down half of its manufacturing plants because the automated systems could not adapt to supply chain disruptions. The most devastating failure occurred on the resort world of Paradise Station, where the climate control system collapsed completely. The planet had been terraformed to provide perfect weather conditions for tourists from dozens of different species. The climate system required constant small adjustments to maintain the precise atmospheric balance that made the world habitable. Human technicians had operated the climate control system for over 20 years, and they had developed an intuitive understanding of how weather patterns interacted with the terraforming equipment. They could predict problems days in advance and make preventive adjustments that kept everything stable. The system seemed automatic to outside observers, but it actually required human judgment and creativity to function properly. When the climate system failed, the planet experienced massive storms that destroyed resort facilities and forced the evacuation of millions of tourists. The economic impact spread throughout the galaxy as the tourism industry collapsed and thousands of businesses that depended on Paradise Station went bankrupt. Commander Rachel Stone was now leading the advanced scouts for humanity's colonization efforts in unexplored regions of space. Her ships had found several worlds that were perfect for human settlement, and the first permanent colonies were already being established. The humans were building a new civilization that would never again depend on alien approval or cooperation. Rachel had been monitoring alien communications, and she could see that panic was beginning to set in among the council leadership. The aliens were starting to understand that they had not just lost human workers when they forced the exodus. They had lost the one species that could make their complex technological civilization actually work in practice, rather than just in theory. The crystalline collective had always prided themselves on their logical approach to engineering and their ability to create perfect designs that never needed modification. But their mining operations were now producing less than 30% of their previous output, despite using exactly the same equipment and procedures that had worked when humans were involved. The collective had finally realized that human miners had been making thousands of tiny improvements over the years that increased efficiency without changing the basic design of the mining systems. These improvements had never been documented in official reports because they seemed too small and obvious to mention. But taken together, they had made an enormous difference in how well the systems performed. Now, the collective was trying to reverse engineer the human improvements by analyzing the equipment and comparing current performance with historical records. But they were discovering that human creativity could not be replicated through logical analysis. The improvements had been based on intuitive understanding that developed through hands-on experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Dr. Nathan Pierce was working as the chief medical officer for the human colonial fleet, and he had been following the medical crisis that was devastating alien populations throughout Council space. The disease that had appeared months earlier was now spreading faster than alien doctors could treat it. Hospital systems were overwhelmed, and mortality rates were climbing every day. The alien doctors had access to all the medical research and treatment protocols that human doctors had developed. They had the same equipment and the same medications that should have been effective against the disease. But they were not achieving the same success rates that human doctors had achieved when treating similar conditions. Nathan knew that the problem was not lack of knowledge or resources. The alien doctors were following correct procedures, but they were not adapting their treatments to individual patients the way human doctors had always done. Medical treatment required the ability to recognize when standard procedures were not working and to improvise solutions based on creative thinking and intuitive understanding of how different bodies responded to different treatments. The final crisis that brought everything to a head occurred when the Council headquarters building on Centris Prime lost life support completely. 2 years after humanity's silent departure from Council space, a delegation of the most powerful alien leaders in the galaxy traveled to the edge of known space seeking an audience with human representatives. The delegation included Counselor Supreme Zix Kentel of the Aquatic Dominion High Commander Vex Thera of the Crystalline Collective and Prime Mind Sincaller of the Ethereal Communion. They came not as conquerors or negotiators, but as desperate petitioners hoping to convince humanity to save the civilization that had rejected them. President Sarah Mills received the alien delegation aboard the massive colony ship Independence, which now served as the mobile capital of the Human Colonial Alliance. The ship was a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Its halls buzzed with activity as humans worked together to build a new future among distant stars. Children played in gardens that grew under artificial suns while their parents planned the next phase of human expansion into unexplored space. The contrast between the thriving human ship and the desperate alien visitors was stark and deliberate. Sarah had chosen to meet the delegation in the main observation deck, where they could see the fleet of human ships that stretched across space like a river of lights. Each ship carried thousands of humans who had found freedom and purpose beyond the reach of alien control. Counselor Supreme Zix Kentel spoke first with the formal dignity that aliens always used in important negotiations. The Aquatic Dominion offered full membership in the Galactic Council with voting rights equal to any other species. It promised vast compensation for the losses humans had suffered during the Exodus. They offered exclusive trading rights and access to the most advanced alien technologies in the galaxy. Hi, Commander Vex Thera of the Crystalline Collective, went further with promises that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. The Collective offered to share their most closely guarded engineering secrets and to build new worlds specifically designed for human colonization. They promised that humans would have complete autonomy over their own territories and that no alien government would ever again interfere with human affairs. Prime Mind Sincalar of the Ethereal Communion made the most remarkable offer of all. The telepathic species that had always considered themselves superior to all others offered to share their mental technologies with humans. They promised teach humans telepathic abilities and to include human thoughts in the great mental network that connected ethereal minds across the galaxy. President Sarah Mills listened to each offer with polite attention, but her expression never changed. When the aliens finished speaking, she stood and walked to the viewport where the human fleet could be, seen stretching toward distant stars. The aliens followed her, and for the first time they truly saw what humanity had built in just 2 years of freedom. The human ships were not copies of alien designs or improvements on alien technology. They were something completely new that reflected human values and human ways of thinking about space travel. The ships looked organic and alive compared to the geometric precision of alien vessels. They moved in formations that seemed chaotic, but were actually incredibly efficient at covering vast distances while protecting each other from dangers. Sarah turned back to the alien delegation and delivered humanity's response in words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. She told them that they had missed the most important point about what had happened over the past 2 years. The aliens still fought in terms of resources and compensation and trading agreements. They still believed that humans were a problem to be managed, rather than equals to be respected. The human president explained that her people had not left council space because they wanted better deals or more compensation. They had left because they were tired of being treated as useful tools rather than as intelligent beings with their own hopes and dreams and ideas about how civilization should work. The aliens had offered them everything except the one thing that humans truly wanted, which was simple respect for their right to exist as equals. Admiral Jake Morrison had been listening to the conversation from his position near the back of the observation deck. He had commanded the transport ship that carried the last humans away from Earth, and he had watched his people transform from refugees into pioneers over the past 2 years. The aliens' offers were generous, but they came too late and for all the wrong reasons. Jake stepped forward and added his own perspective to the president's response. He told the aliens that humans had been preparing for this moment for decades. Every slight and every dismissal and every attempt to limit human development had been carefully noted and remembered. The human exodus had not been a desperate escape, but a planned transition to something better than what they had left behind. The human fleet had been built in secret over many years using resources that aliens had thought were being used for other purposes. The colony ships were equipped with everything needed to establish self-sufficient human civilizations that would never again depend on alien cooperation. The humans had even developed new technologies that were specifically designed to work without any alien components or knowledge. Chief Engineer Diana Foster joined the conversation to explain the technical achievements that humans had accomplished during their 2 years of independence. The human ships used propulsion systems that were more efficient than anything aliens had ever built. Their life support systems could sustain human populations indefinitely without any outside resources. Their manufacturing capabilities could produce everything from simple tools to complex computers using only materials found in space. But the most important human achievement was not technological, but social. The humans had created a form of government that balanced individual freedom with collective responsibility in ways that alien societies had never managed. Human colonies were places where creativity and innovation flourished because people were encouraged to try new ideas, rather than punished for challenging established traditions. Dr. Nathan Pierce spoke about the medical advances that humans had made since leaving Council space. Without the constraints of alien medical regulations, human doctors had developed new treatments that were more effective than anything available in the galaxy. Human medical technology was specifically designed to work with human biology and human approaches to healing that emphasized adaptation and resilience rather than rigid protocols. The alien delegation listened with growing desperation as they realized that humans had not just survived their exile, but had actually thrived beyond anything the aliens had thought possible. The humans were not refugees seeking to return home, but pioneers who had built something better than what they had lost. They had no reason to return to a galaxy that had rejected them when they could continue building their own civilization among the stars. Young Emma Foster had grown up entirely in the human colonial fleet, and she represented the new generation that would never know what it meant to live under alien rule. At 16 years old, she was already an accomplished engineer who worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of human technology. She had been chosen to speak for the young people who would inherit the future that their parents were building. Emma told the alien visitors that humans had learned an important lesson from their experience in Council space. The lesson was that it was better to build something new than to try to fix something that was fundamentally broken. The alien civilization was based on hierarchy and control and rigid thinking that could not accommodate the kind of creativity and flexibility that humans needed to flourish. The human colonies were based on different principles that emphasized cooperation and innovation, and the belief that every person had valuable contributions to make, regardless of their species or background. Humans had already begun making contact with other species that had been marginalized by the galactic mainstream, and they were building a new kind of civilization that welcomed diversity rather than fearing it. Lieutenant Commander Ben Hughes had spent 2 years monitoring the collapse of alien civilization from his hidden observation posts, and he now revealed the full extent of what humans had learned about the crisis in Council space. The problems were getting worse every day, and there was no sign that alien governments could solve them without human help. But human help was no longer available on the terms that aliens were used to. Ben explained that humans had offered to share their problem-solving expertise with aliens many times over the years. They had suggested joint research projects and collaborative approaches to difficult challenges that could have benefited everyone. But aliens had always insisted on maintaining control and limiting human participation to narrow technical roles that did not threaten alien authority. Now the aliens wanted human help, but they still wanted it on their own terms. They were offering to hire human consultants and to pay for human services, but they were not offering to treat humans as true partners in building a better galaxy. The fundamental attitude that had caused the original crisis had not changed, and humans had no reason to believe that returning to Council space would lead to anything different than what had happened before.